My name is Amara Reyes. For most of my 24 years, I have been a student of quiet observation. I learned early that my presence was often felt as a soft echo in a house built for a grander sound. That sound was my sister, Sophia. Born 2 years before me, she arrived in the world as if she already owned it, her cries commanding attention, her laughter a melody our parents were perpetually eager to hear. I was the afterthought, the quieter child who learned to make herself small, not out of fear, but out of a misplaced sense of consideration. Our home, a two-story colonial in the meticulously manicured suburb of Crestwood, was a stage for Sophia's triumphs. Her every painting, no matter how abstract, was framed and hung in the hallway. Her piano recitals were grand affairs, with rented chairs crowding the lawn and our mother serving iced tea in her finest glasses. I, on the other hand, was a creature of the wings. My achievements, a regional science fair award, a poem published in a small literary journal, were met with pleasant, but distracted, smiles. They were quiet accomplishments, easily stored away in a drawer and forgotten, like outgrown clothes. My parents weren't cruel, they were simply selective in their focus. It was as if their capacity for parental pride had a fixed limit, and Sophia had claimed it all. I came to believe that if I was perfect, if I made no demands, caused no trouble, and kept my needs to myself, I would eventually earn my share. But all my good behavior did was make me easier to overlook. It reinforced my role as the dependable, low-maintenance daughter, the steady, quiet background against which Sophia's vibrant life could be displayed. The only creature in that house who truly saw me, was Leo. Sophia had begged for him when she was 16, crafting elaborate presentations on responsibility and companionship. Our parents, as always, relented. Leo, a scruffy terrier mixed with soulful, intelligent eyes, was hers for 3 weeks. Then the novelty wore off. He was too needy, too loud, and he shed on her designer clothes. Talk of sending him to a shelter began, spoken in hushed, practical tones. I was 14, and I stepped in. I promised to walk him, feed him, train him. They agreed, not out of faith in me, but out of convenience. Leo became my shadow, my confidant. He was the first living thing in that house that chose me. He would rest his head on my knee while I did homework, his tail thumping a steady rhythm against the floor. He didn't care about grades or accolades. He cared about presence, and I was always there. He was my anchor to the world, a warm, breathing testament to the fact that I existed and that my affection had value. My other sanctuary was my grandfather's house. Grandpa Mateo lived 10 blocks away in a small, yellow cottage that smelled of old books, pipe tobacco, and peppermint. He was a man of few words, but immense presence. When the quiet tension at home became unbearable, I would leash Leo and we would walk to Grandpa's. He never pressed for details. He would just make me a grilled cheese sandwich, the bread perfectly toasted, the cheese impossibly gooey, and listen. He would sit in his worn armchair, Leo at my feet, and nod as I spoke, his silence a comforting vessel that could hold all of my unspoken feelings. He was the only adult who ever made me feel like my voice mattered, even when it trembled. When Sophia left for a prestigious university out of state, an unnatural quiet fell over our house. It wasn't peaceful, it was hollow. My parents' lives, so long oriented around her, seemed to lose their gravitational center. They texted her constantly, their conversations a stream of worried check-ins and effusive praise for her new life. A year later, she was back. There was no grand announcement, just her luggage in the hallway and a terse explanation: college was toxic. She retreated into her room, and a new, strange energy seeped into the house. There were hushed phone calls, visitors who arrived late at night and left before dawn, and a sweet, acrid smell that clung to the upstairs hallway. I noticed the changes in her, the slight tremor in her hands, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she flinched at sudden noises. But in our family, to ask was to accuse, to notice was to create drama. So I said nothing, retreating further into the quiet world I had built for myself with Leo and my books, unaware that the stage was being set for a final, devastating performance, with me cast in the leading role. It began not with a bang, but with a knock. A calm, authoritative rap on the front door that cut through the sleepy quiet of a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't the mailman. His knock was a hurried tap. It wasn't a neighbor. They used the doorbell. This was different. A cold knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach, a strange premonition that the carefully constructed piece of my world was about to be breached. I opened the door to two police officers. One was tall and lean, with a face that seemed permanently set in an expression of weary patience. The other was shorter, more solidly built, his eyes scanning past me into the house. "Amara Reyes?" the tall one asked. His voice was neutral, devoid of emotion. "Yes," I managed, my own voice barely a whisper. My mind raced, trying to find a reason for their presence. A traffic ticket I'd forgotten? A noise complaint? Nothing made sense. Behind them, Crestwood looked serene and undisturbed. Mrs. Gable's prize-winning roses bloomed in a riot of color, and a child's laughter drifted from a nearby yard. It was a picture of suburban tranquility, a stark contrast to the sudden fear coiling in my chest. "We've received an anonymous tip regarding the possession of illegal narcotics at this address," the officer said, his words precise and devastating. "We have a warrant to search the premises." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Narcotics," I echoed, the word feeling foreign and absurd on my tongue. I stepped back, my body moving on autopilot, allowing them to enter. In that moment, a flicker of a terrible thought crossed my mind: Sophia. Her strange behavior, the secretive visitors, the smell from her room. I thought this was about her. I thought the truth was finally coming to light. I was wrong. I followed them into the living room, a silent observer in my own home. My mother was there, sitting in an armchair with a book in her lap. She looked up, her expression one of polite, rehearsed concern. She wasn't surprised. "Oh, officers," she said, her voice calm, as if she were greeting expected guests. "Amara's room is upstairs. Second door on the right." The blood drained from my face. I stared at her, my mind struggling to process her words. "What? My room? Why my room?" No one answered. My father stood by the fireplace, his gaze fixed on a point on the wall, his posture rigid. He wouldn't look at me. In that instant, I understood. This wasn't a mistake. It was a script, and I was the only one who hadn't read it. The officers moved with a practiced efficiency, their footsteps heavy on the stairs. I trailed behind them, a sense of dreamlike horror enveloping me. Sophia was at the top of the landing, leaning against the railing. She watched them pass, her face a blank mask, her eyes cold and empty. Leo, who had been sleeping in my room, lifted his head as they entered. He let out a low whine, sensing the intrusion, the wrongness of it all. He looked at me, his tail giving a single, uncertain thump against the rug. The taller officer scanned my room, my sanctuary, the one place in the house that was truly mine. The other went straight to my dresser. He didn't search. He pulled open the bottom drawer, the one where I kept my winter sweaters, and reached inside. He pulled out a small, clear plastic bag filled with white pills. A choked, incredulous laugh escaped my lips. It was a sound of pure disbelief, of a mind pushed beyond its capacity for reason. "That's not mine," I said, my voice shaking. "I've never seen that before in my life." They didn't react. They had heard it 1,000 times before. I spun around, my gaze locking on my parents, who now stood in the hallway, watching. "Mom? Dad? Tell them. You know that's not mine." My mother's hands were clasped in front of her, her knuckles white. "We were so worried, Amara," she said, her voice laced with a counterfeit sorrow. "You've been so distant lately, so secretive." "We saw you with that bag," my father added, his voice flat, still refusing to meet my eyes. "We didn't know what to do." It was a lie. A monstrous, calculated lie. The air left my lungs. It was like watching a play, a tragedy in which I was the unsuspecting victim, and my own family were the authors of my ruin. "This is insane," I whispered, turning to Sophia. "Sophia, tell them the truth." Her eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something: guilt? Fear, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "Amara, don't," my mother said, her voice dropping to a warning tone. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. They put the handcuffs on me in the hallway. The cold metal bit into my wrists, a brutal, physical manifestation of their betrayal. Leo began to bark, a frantic, distressed sound that tore at my heart. One of the officers gently pushed him back into my room and closed the door. Through the wood, I could hear his desperate scratching, his confused and terrified whimpers. As they led me out of the house, Sophia watched from the top of the stairs, her expression unreadable. She hadn't moved. She just stood there as they took me away, her silence a final, damning verdict. The ride in the back of the police car was a blur. I watched my home, the place where I grew up, the place that was supposed to be my safe harbor, shrink in the rearview mirror until it was gone. I didn't cry. The shock was too deep, the betrayal too profound. It had hollowed me out, leaving nothing but a cold, empty space where my trust and my love for my family used to be. They had chosen her. They had sacrificed me to protect her. And in the sterile silence of that police car, I finally understood that I had never been a daughter to them, only a supporting character, easily written out of the story when my role became inconvenient. The holding cell was a study in gray. Gray cinder block walls, a gray concrete floor, and a narrow, gray metal bench. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting a sterile, unforgiving glow and humming a monotonous, maddening tune. Time seemed to lose its meaning in that colorless box. There were no windows, no clocks, just the rhythmic clang of distant doors and the muffled sounds of a world I was no longer a part of. I sat on the cold bench, my hands resting in my lap. The red marks from the handcuffs were still visible on my wrists, a faint, angry reminder of the moment my life had fractured. My mind, which had been a whirlwind of shock and disbelief, was now eerily calm. It was a strange, detached state, as if my consciousness had retreated to a safe distance to observe the wreckage of my life. I thought of Leo. I pictured him waiting by my bedroom door, his ears perked for the sound of my return. I wondered if they had fed him, if they had let him out. A wave of anguish washed over me, so sharp and sudden it took my breath away. He wouldn't understand. He would only know that I was gone. The thought of him, alone and confused, was more painful than my own predicament. He was my responsibility, my loyal friend, and I had been taken from him. Then, my thoughts drifted to Grandpa Mateo. Had they called him? What had they told him? I could imagine my mother's voice, thick with feigned regret, painting a picture of a troubled, wayward granddaughter. Would he believe them? A part of me, the part that had been nourished by his quiet, unwavering affection, knew that he wouldn't. But doubt, like a persistent weed, still found a way to take root. The weight of my family's betrayal was so immense, it seemed capable of crushing anything, even the steadfast love of the one person who had always seen me. The next morning, a guard led me to a small, airless room for a visitor. My parents were sitting at a metal table, their faces etched with a carefully calibrated concern. They looked like they were attending a parent-teacher conference for a child who had misbehaved. "Amara," my mother began, her voice soft and gentle. It was the voice she used when she was trying to smooth over a difficult situation, to manage an unpleasant reality. "Are you all right? Are they treating you well?" I stared at her, at the practiced sincerity in her eyes, and felt nothing but a vast, empty coldness. "They gave me a blanket," I said, my voice flat. My father cleared his throat. "We've hired a lawyer for you, Amara. A Ms. Zara Khan. She's very good. She'll help you through this." "Help me through what?" I asked, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to keep it steady. "Help me take the blame for something I didn't do?" My mother reached across the table, but I flinched away from her touch. "Sweetheart, we need to be realistic," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Sophia, she's not strong like you are. A scandal like this, it would destroy her. Her future, her career, everything she's worked for." There it was. The truth, laid bare in the sterile confines of that gray room. It wasn't about justice or innocence or truth. It was about protecting Sophia, the golden child, at all costs. I was the cost. "I'm her sister," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "And that's why you need to do this," my father said, finally meeting my gaze. His eyes were not cold or angry. They were pleading. For the family. We can't let this tear us apart. You're young, you're resilient. You'll get through this. Probation, community service, it won't be so bad. But Sophia, she would be ruined. I looked from his face to my mother's, and in their eyes, I saw not a request, but an expectation. They had already decided my fate. They had weighed my life against Sophia's and found mine wanting. The invisible child was now the disposable one. A question, cold and sharp, cut through my despair. What about Leo? They exchanged a quick, uneasy glance. Well, my mother said, her voice softening with a pity that was more insulting than any anger. Under the circumstances, we don't think it's right to keep him. He's old and with you, gone. It's not fair to him. You're not putting him down, I said. It wasn't a question. It was a command, spoken with a sudden, fierce clarity that surprised even me. We'll do what's best for everyone, Amara, my father said gently. I stood up, the legs of my chair scraping against the concrete floor. Get out, I said, my voice low and trembling with a rage that was so pure, so absolute, it was almost calm. Get out. They left, their faces a mixture of surprise and hurt, as if they couldn't understand my reaction. They had come to offer me my script, to tell me my part in their family drama, and I had refused to play along. As the door closed behind them, I sank back onto the chair, the last vestiges of my hope crumbling into dust. They weren't just going to let me fall. They were going to erase every part of me, even the unconditional love of a faithful old dog. In the suffocating silence of that room, a tiny, defiant spark ignited within me. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a pawn they could sacrifice. They had forgotten who I was. I was the quiet one, the observer, the one who noticed everything. And as I sat there, a memory surfaced, a detail so small and insignificant that I had almost forgotten it. A small wooden bird, a carving my grandfather had given me years ago, sat on my bookshelf. It was a delicate thing, a testament to his patient, loving hands. And last year, after Leo had a small seizure, I had bought a tiny, motion-activated camera, no bigger than a thumbnail, and hidden it in the eye of that bird. I wanted to be able to check on him when I wasn't home to make sure he was safe. It recorded to a micro SD card. No Wi-Fi, no cloud. Simple. Secret. The camera faced my dresser. My heart began to beat a frantic, hopeful rhythm against my ribs. It was a long shot. The camera might not have been on. The card could be full. Sophia could have found it. But it was something. It was a thread. I was allowed one phone call. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number of my best friend, Isabella. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. Isabella, I said, my voice urgent. I need you to do something for me. Something important. And you can't ask any questions. I told her about the wooden bird on my bookshelf. I told her about the camera. You have to go to my house, I pleaded. Tell my parents you're picking up some of my things. Get the bird. And, Isabella, get Leo. Please. Take him to your place. Don't let them take him to the shelter. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and then, her voice firm and resolute, I'm on my way. I hung up the phone, a single tear finally tracing a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sorrow or of fear. It was a tear of gratitude. In a world that had suddenly turned dark and hostile, one person still believed in me. One person was willing to fight for me. And for the first time since the knock on the door, I felt a flicker of hope. They had underestimated me. They had forgotten that even the quietest person has a voice. And I was about to find mine. The meeting with my court-appointed lawyer, Zara Khan, took place in another soulless, beige room at the courthouse. She was sharp and impeccably dressed, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through the fragile composure I had struggled to maintain. My parents had likely chosen her for her reputation as a no-nonsense litigator, assuming she would efficiently manage my guilty plea. She listened without interruption as I recounted my version of events, her expression neutral. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against a legal pad. It's a compelling narrative, Amara, she said, her tone professional, but without proof. It's your word against your entire family's. That's a difficult position to be in. I might have proof, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I told her about the wooden bird, the hidden camera, and the desperate phone call to Isabella. A flicker of interest crossed her face. Did your friend get it? She did, I confirmed. She got the bird, and she got Leo. He's safe with her. A wave of relief washed over me at the thought of him, safe and cared for. Ms. Khan's demeanor shifted. The professional detachment was replaced by a focused intensity. I need that SD card, Amara. Immediately. The next 24 hours were a blur of anxious waiting. Isabella, a true and loyal friend, delivered the small wooden bird to Ms. Khan's office. The hours stretched into an eternity as I waited in my cell, oscillating between hope and despair. What if the footage was corrupted? What if the camera angle had missed the crucial moment? The call came late the next afternoon. Ms. Khan wanted to see me. When I was led into the meeting room, she was waiting with a laptop. She didn't say a word, just turned the screen towards me and pressed play. The footage was grainy, the colors slightly washed out, but it was clear. It showed my bedroom, empty at first. Then, the door opened and Sophia slipped inside. She moved with a furtive haste, her eyes starting towards the hallway. She went directly to my dresser, pulled the small plastic bag from the sleeve of her hoodie, and slid it into the bottom drawer. The entire act took less than 30 seconds. She gave one last look around before disappearing from the frame. The timestamp in the corner of the screen read 3:17 p.m., the day before my arrest. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. It was real. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. It was a cold, hard, undeniable fact. It's everything we need, Ms. Khan said, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of triumph. She had already scheduled what she called a pretrial conference, a meeting with the prosecutor, my parents, and Sophia. They think this is a formality to discuss the terms of your plea, she explained. They have no idea what's coming. We met in a conference room at the courthouse. The air was thick with tension. My parents sat across the table, their faces masks of strained solemnity. Sophia sat beside them, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the table. She looked small and sullen, a child being forced to attend a tedious adult gathering. Ms. Khan began the meeting with a calm, clinical professionalism. Before we proceed, she said, opening her laptop, I believe it would be beneficial for all parties to review a new piece of evidence that has come to my attention. She turned the laptop around. The room was silent as the video played. I watched my mother's face. The color drained from it, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white. Her mouth opened slightly, a small, soundless gasp. My father leaned forward, his eyes wide with disbelief, as if he couldn't process what he was seeing. Sophia didn't move. She just stared at her own image on the screen, her betrayal playing out in grainy detail. When the video ended, a heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. It was broken by Sophia, her voice a shrill, defensive cry. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You weren't supposed to get arrested. It was just to scare you a little. Scare me? I said, my voice quiet but clear. Why? Her head snapped up, her eyes blazing with a sudden, resentful fury. Because you're always so perfect. So quiet and good. Mom and Dad are always worried about you, wondering if you're happy. And Grandpa, he dotes on you. It's always Amara, Amara, Amara. You think you're so much better than everyone. The prosecutor, a woman with tired eyes who had seen it all, looked from Sophia to my parents. Would anyone, she asked, her voice dry, like to amend their sworn statement at this time? My mother finally found her voice a weak, trembling thing. We were just trying to protect our family, she whispered. No, I said, my voice gaining strength. You were trying to protect Sophia. There's a difference. I looked at them, at the people who were supposed to love me, to protect me, and for the first time, I felt not pain, but a strange, liberating pity. They were so trapped in their own narrative, so blinded by their favoritism, that they had become monstrous. Ms. Khan closed her laptop with a decisive snap. All charges against my client will be dismissed, she stated, her voice ringing with authority. Furthermore, we will be submitting this footage, along with the original false statements, to the district attorney's office. Perjury and filing a false police report are serious felonies. The reality of those words descended upon my parents. My father buried his face in his hands. My mother began to sob, not for me, but for herself, for the ruin she had brought upon her own house. Sophia just sat there, frozen, the architect of her own destruction. They left the room in disgrace, not one of them looking at me. They had walked into that room expecting my surrender, my silent acceptance of the role they had assigned me. Instead, they had witnessed my rebirth. I had found my voice, and it had spoken the truth. And the truth, I was discovering, was a powerful and fearsome thing. In the aftermath, the quiet of Grandpa Mateo's yellow house was a balm to my fractured spirit. Leo, my furry, four-legged hero, rarely left my side, a constant, comforting presence. The legal proceedings against my family unfolded with a grim, inevitable momentum. I was not required to attend, a mercy for which I was grateful. Miss Khan handled everything, her sharp competence a shield against the ugliness of it all. Sophia, faced with irrefutable evidence, pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to 3 years in a state correctional facility for possession with intent to distribute and conspiracy to commit perjury. Her tearful, rambling confession in court painted a pathetic picture of jealousy and entitlement. She spoke of the inheritance Grandpa Mateo had recently told my parents he intended to leave entirely to me, a revelation that had apparently been the final catalyst for their desperate, destructive plan. It was a motive so crass, so venal, it was almost unbelievable. They had been willing to sacrifice my future for their financial gain. My parents were convicted of obstruction of justice and conspiracy. They each received an 18-month sentence in the county jail, followed by a long period of probation. Their polished, respectable lives in Crestwood were shattered. Friends stopped calling. Reputations were ruined. According to Ms. Khan, they had turned on each other, their alliance crumbling under the weight of blame and regret. Grandpa Mateo and I sat on his porch swing one evening, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance. Leo was asleep at my feet, his paws twitching as he dreamed. For a long time, we were silent, the gentle creak of the swing the only sound. Healing isn't always about forgiveness, Amara, he said finally, his voice raspy with age, but full of wisdom. Sometimes, it's about understanding your own worth. It's about building boundaries to protect the person you've become. His words resonated deep within me. I had spent so long trying to earn their love, to be seen by them, that I had lost sight of myself. The betrayal, as devastating as it was, had been a violent, painful awakening. It had forced me to see that I could not find my value in their eyes, because they were incapable of seeing me clearly. I moved in with Grandpa Mateo permanently. We painted my new bedroom a soft, calming shade of blue. I enrolled in classes at the local community college, drawn, ironically, to criminal justice. I wanted to understand the system that had almost consumed me, to learn how to help others who might find themselves lost and voiceless within it. One day, a letter arrived. The handwriting was Sophia's. I held it in my hand for a long time, the thin paper feeling heavy with the weight of all our shared history, all our broken bonds. I didn't open it. I wasn't ready to read her words, to engage with her version of remorse. I placed it, unopened, in a drawer. Maybe one day I would read it. Maybe I never would. The choice, for the first time, was mine. My life is quiet now, but it is not empty. It is filled with the scent of old books and peppermint tea, the warmth of a loyal dog, and the steady, unconditional love of a grandfather who always saw me. I am learning to trust myself, to value my own voice. The wounds are still there, a faint, silvery network of scars on my soul, but they no longer ache. They're a reminder not of what I lost, but of what I survived. There is a quiet strength in rebuilding. There is a profound peace in self-acceptance. My name is Amara Reyes, and I am no longer an echo. I am the sound of my own voice, and it is enough.